Here's another one of those places where he changes the Bible. Now, hopefully you will catch this, but this is a confusing passage, right? The Bible uses the word heavens in the plural because I believe it's talking here about birds fly in the heavens. There's like stars and the sun and stuff up in the heavens, and then finally God dwells up in heaven. So there's different levels of heaven, but we're only talking about like atmosphere, outer space, and then God's dwelling place and God's presence. But look at what he does, trying to teach a new Mormon theology about these three levels of heaven, which are all three spiritual levels that have nothing to do with the biblical terminology. He changes 1 Corinthians. So 1 Corinthians 15, verse 40, it says, also celestial bodies and bodies terrestrial and bodies telestial, but the glory of the celestial one and the terrestrial one another, and the telestial another. And if you're like me going, okay, celestial, I know what that means. Terrestrial, terra means of the earth, right? So celestial, of the skies, right? Of the heavens, and then terrestrial, of the ground. What's telestial? Well, telestial is a word he made up to make a third level of heaven that is just another place you might be able to go when you die. So he sticks this into 1 Corinthians 15:40, and if you have any doubt about what he's doing, the heading that's provided, it says there are 3 degrees of glory in the resurrection. So he interprets it for us. We have the LDS interpretation. Now let's look at this text in the actual Word of God, in the actual Bible. So for 1 Corinthians 15:40. There are heavenly bodies and earthly bodies, but the glory of the heavenly is of one kind, and the glory of the earthly is of another. But then it goes on. It explains, right? The glory of the sun, the glory of the moon, the stars. The bodies here are not talking about human bodies, right? It's talking about there's differences between things in space and things on Earth, and they live in a different kind of environment than us. And so, like, I couldn't live in space. I can live on Earth. The sun wouldn't work out on Earth, and vice versa. And so, in the same sense, we will need a new body for our eternal, glorious, like, heaven existence. Although we won't be in heaven. Read Revelation, heaven comes to earth and all that glorious stuff. But no. This isn't heavenly bodies, earthly bodies. No, this is, in fact, let's add a third kind in there. Let's just change the text entirely and make it about degrees of glory. Celestial bodies, terrestrial ones, and telestial ones, new made up word, just stuck right into the text of 1 Corinthians 15:40. Now, at this point, I want to respond to an objection. So if you were raised LDS, and probably if you just are not really familiar with Christianity, not really familiar with the Bible, you kind of have like a popular understanding of these issues, you're thinking, oh, come on, Mike, the Bible's been corrupted. Everybody knows that, right? Mormons, generally speaking, are taught that the Bible has been radically adjusted and changed over the years. It's like the telephone game. The problem is that's utterly false. Like, this is just, you don't know what you're talking about if you think that. So what I've done, though, is I've gotten an actual Mormon scholar, a guy who knows the ancient languages and lectures, and he's literally a Mormon apologist. So I have a clip from him where he's going to talk about this passage, 1 Corinthians 15:40. And in this passage, he's gonna give the oh gosh, I meant to write his name down. I've got it. Oh yeah, it's Kevin L. Barney, and you can just Google him. Wikipedia page will show that he's a Mormon apologist guy. So he's talking about why 1 Corinthians 15:40 was this way in the Joseph Smith translation. Like, why was it this way? So listen to his explanation, because it shows you that it's not because the passage was corrupted. His explanation is, he says it in a nice way, right? Because he wants to encourage Mormons, but it's very revealing about what's actually happened here. Let's listen in.
On February 16th, 1832, the prophet Joseph received what we call the vision, D&C 76, which was inspired by his work on the JST of John 5:29.
Okay, so far he just says, hey, supposedly the prophet received this vision, and it's been inspiring him sort of creatively thinking about the Bible in new ways, and this vision has to do with these levels of heaven. So let's keep listening.
A couple of weeks later, Joseph dictated the revisions to 1 Corinthians 15, and in verse 40, he harmonized the text to match D&C 76 by adding the neologism telestial to the Latinate terms celestial and...
Neologism? Is that what he called it? That means new word. Neo means new, right? Logos means word. Neologism. That is just scholar talk for he made up a word. That's all it is. I'm going to back it up. I want you to hear him say it again because it's scholarly blinders being pulled over the eyes of the uninformed so that they can feel like a smart guy told me I can trust this. But what he's really doing is in a convoluted way admitting that Joseph Smith made it up. So listen in.
1 Corinthians 15. And in verse 40, he harmonized the text to match D&C 76 by adding the neologism telestial to the Latinate terms celestial and terrestrial. This is a classic illustration of the Matthew's category of harmonizing the biblical text to conform to one of the prophet's modern revelations.
Did you hear that? Harmonizing the biblical text to conform to one of the prophet's earlier revelations. That is just a fancy way of saying that here this Mormon scholar apologist guy says straight up, Kevin Barney says straight up, Joseph Smith changed the Bible to fit with his prophecies. That's all that is. And neologism and all the fancy way he puts it doesn't help. Now, this is in the course of a whole video where all he's doing is he's just trying to explain the passages that Joseph changed. And in many cases he goes, I think he improved the translation here, I think he helped here. But when he comes to the place in 1 Corinthians where Joseph is actually adding Mormon theology, he's not just tweaking the text randomly, he's like adding theology. He just admits this is just, it's harmonization, basically. He just made stuff up, invented new words, stuck it into the Bible.